Yeah, do
Okay.
introduce yourselves on the chat to tell me who you are and where you're coming from. We've got people registered from all over the country, so do say where you're dialing in from, because we do like to have a look afterwards. It's really interesting. But welcome
Yeah.
today. Should be a bit of a cracker this one. We're really looking forward to dangerous structures, I must say. So, oh, hi, Joe from in Hatfield, right, very close there. Mark from East Herts as well, Norwich, St Albans, South Vale. It's all our local people.
Mark. Hi, Mark.
James from STG. Do you know what? STG post a lot of cake pictures on their Twitter. Don't know if you knew that. I always try and make a comment on their cake pictures.
Are they recruiting?
It might be a good idea, might it? Post cake pictures and get people to join.
Yeah.
Blackburn. And our local Herts County Council. Great to see everybody coming in.
Yeah, I think as usual we'll have the mix of building control and non-building control. So
We have today, yes,
there.
a good mixture of people.
Good. Well, hopefully there'll be something for everybody.
We'll just wait a minute. The figures are still coming in, so I haven't slowed yet. Hi to Newham. Hi Andy from STG. Calderdale. Hi Pat from Brent.
Never heard of them.
I think Pat's brought some more Brent people to this today, so thank you, Pat.
Keep Pat muted, won't you, Rachel? Yeah. Only kidding, mate. Only kidding.
It's great to see everybody, and thank you for coming. It's the summer holidays, so I do know that a lot of people are away in August, so it's really great that so many people can be here today. Got an amazing session on dangerous structures today with Trevor. If you want to read a bit more about Trevor, I have put his bio in the chat, so do have a read of that. Also, I've put my LinkedIn if you want to connect with me. Do hit the link there and connect with me on LinkedIn. That's great. Trevor, shall we make a start?
Excellent. Yeah. If you're ready to go, then let's go with it. So let's talk about a lesser known string to the building control bow, which is our work on dangerous structures. One of the many benefits of the merger of building control teams in Hertfordshire that formed Hertfordshire Building Control in 2016 is that all our owner local authorities, and that's 8 out of the 10 now, have a totally resilient 24/7 service to protect their residents when buildings or structures present hazards. And that happens quite often. In fact, 87 times during the last 12 months. So many thanks to Jane Hall, who my colleague at HBC, who provided this excellent county map showing incidents over the last 12 months that we've dealt with, and conveniently broken down into the type of incident. So you see different coloured arrows there, and just to give you an idea of the sort of spread of things we deal with, blue arrows are damage caused by vehicle impacts, yellow are dangerous walls, the grey represents dilapidated or poorly maintained buildings and structures, orange appropriately is fire damage, purple roofs and chimneys, issues relating to those, and brown, well, you might be able to guess that one, that relates to subsoil excavations and issues resulting from that. So that's a lot of cases that our surveyors dealt with, in addition to their regular plan assessment and site inspection work. Anyway, let's just give you an idea of the what we're going to go over. In a minute, we'll look at all the various types of causes that get us out of bed to deal with these cases. I'll talk about the notification procedure and the response to those notifications. I'll give a bit of my thoughts on inspection and assessing risks and deciding what action to take, and of course about how we make safe buildings using various options of legislation available to us and what's appropriate in what circumstances. So there you go. Firstly, causes, and the first cause I'm going to look at, quite a common one, is fire. We often get called out sometimes when the fire's in progress, sometimes in the aftermath. The picture shows a bit of an old picture now, but it was a furniture warehouse in Ware that went up, and some of you might remember it. In the foreground on the right there, our noble surveyor, Chris Leeburn. Chris lived near the incident, and he got up in that morning and he thought that his partner had burnt the toast. But no, it wasn't that. He became aware that the local warehouse was on fire, and what did he do? True to his profession, he went out there and without being notified, and introduced himself to the fire brigade and gave advice on stability issues. So that was a good one and an interesting one, which I know threw up lots of complexities. Thatch fires is one we get reasonably often. In this case, it's a pub that you can't tell, but it used to have a thatched roof. And there stands the building control surveyor, hands in pockets, casually watching while a dangerous structure resolves itself by burning down to the ground. As they tend to, unfortunately, thatch fires, as any fire brigade colleagues out there in the audience will probably confirm, once they get into the thatch, they're very difficult to put out once they get established, and often this is the resultant. That's another thatch fire, grade 2, listed pair of semi-detached thatched cottages. It was a cold autumn day. The thatch was dry, but the wood burner in the right-hand unit was burning away, and somehow, whether it was cinders or some issue with the chimney, the fire got into the thatch. Not only gutted that house, but also spread across the party wall and gutted the house next door. And the tragedy there was that was owned by somebody, an old lady who was actually not insured. So there's often human tragedies tied up in these incidents we deal with. Next cause, criminal damage. There's 3 striking images. 2 in East Herts. One I think was Bushy, if I remember, the one on the left, more recent. Often the criminals decide they're going to steal a telehandler and try and rip cash machines out of buildings. And the problem there is that they tend not to be too surgical in their approach, and we get called in to deal with the aftermath. So you may recognise this one from a while back. It made national news at the time. If you didn't, maybe you'd like to ponder what caused that pretty major damage to a house that had only just been completed, was about to be occupied, and in fact there were probably 4 or 5 on the same development in the same condition. So what was it? Was it an earthquake? Is it a picture from Ukraine? No, it's another criminal damage case. In fact, it was a contractor who went rogue. He felt he hadn't been paid for the work he'd done, so he jumped in a JCB and wrought his revenge on the developer, and subsequently got locked up for his troubles, I think. So I expect he's out now and probably won't do it again. Right, on to vehicle impacts. We've got a lot of those. Look at this. It's one of those flying cars. Vehicle impact is a very common cause for call-outs, and this isn't one of ours, but it's such a striking image I couldn't resist borrowing it. As you see, in taking out the corner masonry of this building, the car has forcibly become a structural element of the building, and it's going to need a lot of thought to minimise further damage to the building when removing it. So a good head scratcher there for a surveyor to come up with a plan and work with contractors and possibly structural engineers to make safe. Thank you, Richard Murrell. I don't know if you found time to join us today, but anyway, this is one of yours from 2018, I believe. A slightly bigger vehicle involved here. I think the driver thought he was in his Mini and he misjudged the access width. And we were called in to assess the damage. I can let you know that the driver was sacked by the employer, but the following week he managed to get a job delivering to Unit 3 on another industrial estate. Ooh, no, only joking. Pardon my weak humour. This was a similar incident at another warehouse, and both these images, they look pretty awful, but we have to consider the load paths involved and the structural frame of the building. In this case, they would be steel frames, steel being particularly resilient to impact, and whilst there's a lot of damaged masonry, that's almost certainly non-load bearing masonry, and so a relatively easy job to tidy that up and make safe. But of course, we would look at the steel frame just to make sure that nothing nasty had happened to it in that impact. What's next? Well, there's another cause, design and construction defects, and these can set up problems for sometimes long into the future. As in this case, this is a borrowed image, not one of our cases, but a good illustration, where an entire second floor reinforced concrete balcony access to some flats collapsed onto the balcony below. So it subsequently was found that the reinforcement had been badly placed or badly designed, or both. It wasn't fit for purpose to take those cantilever loads over the wall, and so there was cracking in the slab, moisture ingress, and further deterioration until it collapsed. So I'm sure that the owner of the building, and I'm sure building control would have insured the owner of the building, whether that was a local authority or a housing association, would have carried out a thorough investigation to check if any other blocks were similarly affected, so that the remedial works could be scheduled to make sure that didn't happen on any other blocks. Because I don't think anybody was killed or injured. Somebody might be able to correct me in the chat if they're aware of the case. That was more luck than anything. That's just a close-up view of the some of the hanging balcony, the hanging by threads of reinforcement there. I don't think I'd want to stand underneath that lump, would you? Oof. This one from 2016, another national news one, Oxgangs Primary School in Edinburgh, where 9 tons of masonry collapsed onto the ground below. And it turned out that had been caused by poor build quality and inadequate wall tie embedment. Wall ties need to be embedded at least 50 millimetres, as all our surveyors know, and these weren't. And yeah, a bit of wind suction, and it gave way. So this prompted inspections and remedial work to several other recently built schools in Scotland. More causes, extreme weather. We get a lot of variety, don't we, in dangerous structures? Yeah, extreme weather can give us a flurry of cases to deal with. Sometimes we get a bit swamped, especially when you get the really big storms. 3 images there, the left-hand one, yeah, often scaffolds. You see the billowing sails of shrouded scaffolds, and is it any wonder that when the wind gets up, sometimes they give up the ghost and blow down? Nightmarish ones to sort out, because you do need to get a specialist contractor in who's got the insurance to be able to deal with scaffolds. Middle one there, that's wind suction on a gable wall, demonstrating the importance of lateral restraint at rafter level. Those 2 purlins weren't really doing the job. So that even in an old building like that, maybe there's some deterioration, but that wall got blown out. And finally, yeah, a common cause is a tree blown over onto buildings, sometimes doing major damage, sometimes just superficial, and we just go and have a look and don't have to get too involved. And of course, with extreme weather, it might be flood damage. And I know I've been involved in a few cases of lightning strike, which is always interesting tragic, but interesting to see the sort of huge damage that can do to a house. Right, moving on, deterioration of structures. Structures obviously do deteriorate, especially if they're not maintained properly. And we get lots of examples of this, but I've picked these two. One on the left, quite recent, and thanks to the colleague who sent that image to me with the notes to tell me what had happened. Yeah, we've got some cladding panels there. I'm not sure if they're concrete or stone, but they've decided that after 60 years, I'm guessing that's about 1960s, they're going to become detached from that keyed flattened brickwork and crash down to the ground right next to the entrance door to the flats. So really a nasty one there. And I know the surveyor did a very thorough investigation to make sure, or to see if there was any risk of any further panels becoming detached. And meanwhile, the entrance was moved. And on the right there, I think that was a Richard Hearn, that one. Back in the day, the classic chimney pot hanging over the edge of the stack and threatening to drop on a busy highway below. So I know he sorted a cherry picker out and got that taken down a bit promptly. We also get a lot of old derelict buildings that often owners just leave them to slowly deteriorate. They're unoccupied, and it gets to the point then when they present a hazard. And if they aren't secure, and even though it's not likely people will go into them, if people can go into them, then it's something we need to jump on and deal with when they're reported to us. Explosions, striking image there. Yeah, no. And it's an infrequent but spectacular cause, as you can see. In this case, a gas explosion. We have had a few in the county over the years, not many, but this particular one was in Devon. I couldn't get photos of our local ones. This was from 2019. It was a pensioner's bungalow that went up, and you'll be glad to know that she did get out of there without serious injury, which is a wonder, isn't it? But there you go. She was obviously a resilient pensioner. And not only gas can cause explosions. What else causes explosions? Pressurized hot water vessels going off. Every so often, one of these systems, if it's been badly fitted or not maintained properly, the hot water vessel can go bang when the safety valves fail for some reason. And this results in surprisingly major damage. In this instance, there used to be, in the left-hand picture, in that bathroom, there used to be a pressurized hot water cylinder in the corner there. Not much of that left. In fact, not much left of the bathroom. And you can see that's the same building on the right. And the pressure wave from that explosion not only blew the window out, but also blew a lot of the tiles up so they were standing up in the air. So it shows you the huge force that comes about and is released in those sort of incidents. I remember long time ago, one of these went off in Ware and actually took the wall, the second floor masonry out from the front of a block of flats, leaving a precast concrete floor, plank floor hanging in space. It was just a domestic hot water cylinder that managed to do that. Right, now a few folk, you're enjoying these, lots of striking pictures. This one's called construction calamities. I thought of a few other phrases, builders mess ups or whatever, but it wasn't really suitable for this sophisticated audience when I saw who was going to attend today. So I thought construction calamities would do. Quite a few examples from this cause. This one, 2019, it was a rear gable wall and first floor wall it was either inadequately propped when installing that steel beam for the knock through, or it was put in clumsily and the beam caught some propping and took it out. I can't remember, but either way it caused complete collapse of the first floor rear wall and the gable, and quite a nasty injury to the operative who got caught by some of the falling masonry below. You see from the image that some of those incompetent builders seem to be still on site. We've got 5 people in that picture, all walking around a dangerous building, and not a single hard hat to be seen. So there you go. They don't learn their lesson, do they? A bit of natural selection needed there. Second calamity, Letchworth, 2021. David Eggleton on this, and I didn't envy him this one, that's for sure. A real tricky one. More inadequate propping by a builder resulted in the collapse of a major proportion of this large detached house. Interesting to note those bowing props, a couple of 6x2 or 8x2 joists, sorry, old money, but 200 by 50s for the younger audience. Trying to pick up those purlins hanging in space. But it was a brave person who put those in place. I don't think I'd have bothered. Anyway, thank goodness for public liability insurance. Hopefully they were covered. And I put this one in because we deal with a lot of conservatory roof conversions. It's quite a fashionable thing to do. Put solid roofs on conservatories. People argue it's not controlled work. Well, I can assure you it is controlled work, and it's for good reason. And as shown by that, you can't just put a solid roof on a conservatory frame and expect it to sit there happily. Not really a dangerous structure anymore because it's collapsed, but it's a good photo and gives you a chuckle. Nobody was hurt, so we can laugh. Right, house in Bushy in 2021. What do you think? They stripped it off. There's a bungalow. They're obviously going to put a first floor on it and a new roof. Are those walls stable against wind load now that the roof has been removed? Yeah, we've not quite got much lateral restraint there, have we? Well, the builder thought it was okay, and so did the architect when the next door neighbour asked them, is this okay? Because they were concerned about the risk to their property. Well, on the following windy night, they were proved wrong, and that neighbour only escaped serious injury because she was not in her bedroom when one of those unrestrained gables collapsed onto her house. So there, lesson for us all. Yeah, these things can happen, and very unexpectedly. Let's look at the weather forecast when we're seeing walls like that hanging, just sitting there unrestrained. Final calamity, the one from the title slide. What happened here then? We've got the major collapse of a flank wall to a semi-detached house. What's the cause? Has there been an explosion in the garage? Is it coal mining subsidence? No. In fact, it's another case of builders' incompetence. The wall to that flank wall has been undermined by the excavation for a foundation to that neighbouring house on the right-hand side. So there's a foundation excavated, quite a deep one, all the way down the boundary line, undermining the existing foundation of that house and causing it to collapse. So another head scratcher there on the best way to make safe. But the first thing to do, obviously, evacuate both buildings and keep people away from them while you consider how to do the longer term resolution. Subsoil conditions, the brown dots on the map. The failure of foundations in extreme subsoil conditions occasionally gets us out of bed as well, and solution features and swallow holes are not that uncommon in parts of this county, particularly parts of Hertford and in the Digswell area in Welwyn City. So in the image, this is one I dealt with. That footing you see dropped about 250 mil just overnight. The owner heard a cracking in the night, came down to find that huge cracks extending to 3 meters along the flank and rear, and clearly a void underneath that paving that the foundation had dropped into. It was a solution feature, a swallow hole, possibly exacerbated by a leaking drain. There was a manhole right by it and a lot of drainage. And even now, I remember being really surprised at how a bomb-proof flattened brickwork wall in cement mortar on a council house, how resilient it was to hang out over that large void. without any further collapse, which it did until the house was knocked down, because it did write off the house. It was too expensive to do remedial work. And this one, I'm going to thank Nick Archer of the Ori Self Partnership, the structural engineer. He let me use his photos for presentation. In fact, he was the engineer on site to deal with this nasty situation where a block of flats, which had a piled foundation, precast ground beams, and there'd been a rather poor site investigation that hadn't identified some of the nature of the ground conditions. It was old brick pits, I think, so there was filled ground there that got washed out. You got washout around the foundation until you had the collapse into the void, and that took out the corner pile. So those ground beams just hanging in space. Again, it's amazing, isn't it, how resilient a building can be when it's damaged. You think catastrophically, but it's just hanging there by the grace of God. Right, so there you go. Lots of startling images. So stay awake, because I've got a bit drier stuff now. Just tell you about how we deal with notifications, how our operations team and the council switchboards will deal with them when they get notifications. These come from various sources. It might come direct from a member of the public. It might come via a local authority. It might be from the fire service or the police. And our people will log the relevant names and all the contact information for the surveyor's use. They'll, of course, log the location of the structure. And, of course, we need an exact address. We need to get there. Maybe it's the middle of the night. And also we want to know the location of the dangerous part of the building. We don't want to have to waste time hunting around to find what we're looking for. We need a clear description of the hazard, and then at that point we can sort of, if the word is triage the incident and decide, is it actually a dangerous structure? If we then find out actually it's a pile of rubble, well, that's not a dangerous structure and it's not something to bother our people with. Is it a hole in a field? Well, again, a hole in a field is not a structure, even if it's dangerous. And not one we would deal with unless it was next to a building and putting the building at risk of collapse. So we look at to time the report, so give it a time and a date, so it can be immediately forwarded to a surveyor or one of our out of hours team. And our performance targets there, which I understand we keep to pretty rigidly, are 1 hour if it's within office hours, so we will have somebody on attendance within the hour, or 2 hours if it's out of hours. Give them time to rub the sleep out of their eyes and change out of their pajamas. And of course, any other information that can be gleaned when the notification comes in, such as the ownership of the building, which is very useful, the occupation of the building, any contact information for those people, and if it's a police incident, then there'll be a crime reference that we need to log. And here's a list of the important considerations when undertaking that inspection of dangerous structures. A lot of it's obvious, and so apologies to the colleagues out there as saying, you're teaching us to suck eggs again, Trevor. Well, yes, I am, but it's no harm in putting it down in a structured way, because as you know, when we get out there, the adrenaline's running, and sometimes we just need to calm down a bit and follow a sequence. So here's the suggested sequence. First thing, if there's someone on site leading the show, maybe there's a senior fire officer there, then establish the chains of command, get a briefing from those people as to what they want from you, and then get any information you can from all the people present prior to doing the inspection. So then you can inspect the building with particular reference to the state of the structural elements, of course. Think about load paths, think about your construction technology from the top of the building to the bottom. Is the building old and deteriorated? Is that going to exacerbate the problem, or is it otherwise in sound condition? Of course, only inspect initially from all safe available viewpoints. And I underline all, because don't just look at it from one angle, because you can do that. And then when you look from another angle, you think something's safe. You look from another angle, you think, oh my God, I'm glad I didn't go anywhere near that. That wouldn't be the first time I'd done that. So yeah, look as much as you can to see the full extent of any damage that can possibly be seen before going any closer. Yes, so we're trying to ascertain which elements are load bearing, as I say, and also what the nature of that load is. Consider, is there any superimposed load from contents? Is it been overloaded? Is there a hoarder in the house that's overloaded it? Or is it underloaded? Is it a warehouse building that's empty? So it's a very robust building that we can make judgments based on that. Is there any debris in the building? Has it partly collapsed and the fire brigade have been hosing it down, and you've got a serious weight of material loading up a floor or something like that that's never designed to take that? So consider all those things and take action accordingly. Note hazardous substances. And if there's any doubt about it, then prepare for them to be present, particularly things like asbestos, which will, almost certainly be present on buildings of a certain age somewhere in the building. It might be nowhere near the damage, and that's fine. But internally or externally, as we all know that they've had the asbestos training, asbestos can be present and is a terrible thing that we don't want to be ingesting. So get your mask on and only take it off when you're sure there's nothing about that's going to affect you. Also, look, things like gas cylinders, any chemicals that might have a health hazard, highly inflammable liquids that might be spilt, and in extreme cases there may be explosives. Not likely, but it's possible. And of course, it may be necessary to evacuate the building. We also might need to close roads and close footpaths to pedestrians and traffic. And there, the police can help us, give us some sort of authority to do that. And of course, hopefully around the country, you get good communication and cooperation with your highways departments so that they are set up to do that 24/7, get those roads closed if there's a risk to traffic using the road. Nearly finished. Where possible, don't enter the building alone. If you have to, then at least make sure that someone knows you've gone in, and then they can raise an alarm if you don't come out within an agreed time, which you need to set up in advance. Even if you do that via a phone call, it means that if you're in there and in trouble, you will get helped. Put on your appropriate protective clothing, of course, unlike those blokes in the picture there. Don't be numpties like them. And there's an image showing the sort of equipment we're thinking about. Obviously, high-vis jacket or waistcoat, safety boots, safety helmet, eye protection, gloves. There may be all sorts of broken glass and stuff in there. A torch, showing a hand torch, but I would suggest a head torch is the best one for our sort of work. And what's not illustrated is the breathing protection that I mentioned, which of course is very important if there's any chance at all of asbestos being present in or on the building. And when inspecting from the outside, don't stand in such a position where it is possible that you could be injured by falling masonry, falling roof coverings, wall claddings, anything like that. Yes, I know it's obvious, but as I say again, in the adrenaline rushing and the heat of the moment, we sometimes forget. So stay well away and don't stand next to subsided areas where you might fall into a hole. If you're working at height, we've all been trained, the building control people have hopefully been trained on that. If you're going up in the ALP, the aerial lifting platform, then make sure you're properly hooked on and got the harness on. And of course, if you're using any scaffolds or ladders, follow proper procedure. And if you feel that during the inspection, it's unsafe to carry on, which you may see something that think that's not good, then just vacate, abandon the building, and ensure that suitable precautions are taken to prevent any further entry or approach to the zone of danger. Because a building control surveyor, in bold red, a building control surveyor should not put themselves at risk of physical injury in order to undertake their role. That's not what anybody wants you to do. That's not what the MD wants you to do. If there are hazards present and you're of the opinion that entry into the building could result in injury or damage to your health, then just don't go in. It's better to take whatever precautions you think are necessary until specialist advice or equipment that you need is available. So you might just do some guarding to form a no entry zone. And that might just be warning tape. I always say to surveyors I train, oh, that's the one tool. Yeah, you want your hard hat in the boot, but have a roll of warning tape in, because if you're unexpectedly called out to an incident, then yeah, it's better than nothing to keep people away and make people aware there's something going on that they need to be wary of. And then you can put more robust guarding up later on when it can be sourced. And of course, I know a while ago, certainly Herts Fire and Rescue obtained a drone, and if that's available and they're of a mind to help us out, then you can send the drone in, can't you, and have a good look at the building without setting foot anywhere near it before going in. So use the tools available to you. So we've checked the conditions of the structure. Now to think about other risk factors, such as location. Is it in a country field? Is it miles from anywhere? Or is it next to a busy road or footpath that's going to be used by school children? Think about the site history. Have there been previous cases of break-ins to this building or vandalism? Are there going to be people wanting to get in which case let's button it up tight and make sure they can't. Weather. Of course it's critical. Look at that collapsed gable. Is there a force 10 gale forecasted for the following day or not? It's all relevant to our risk assessment. Is the risk area accessible to the general public? And if so, can it be effectively secured against entry? If it can't, then maybe we need to think of other measures to make safe. Are the people that are exposed to the hazard vulnerable people? Are they elderly? Have they got physical or mental disabilities? Are they children? All have a bearing on our decisions. Finally, are there good levels of management control on the premises? Is it a factory? Is it an office where there's management and people can be kept away from the risk, and that's good enough? The general public can't get anywhere near. So think in terms of a risk matrix. In other words, think of the likelihood of something happening and the consequences of it happening in terms of injury and that sort of thing. And then in doing that, you can make a rational decision on what action to take. That might be a Section 77 notice under the Building Act. And that says if it appears to a local authority that a building or structure is in such a condition as to be dangerous, the local authority may apply to a magistrate's court, and the court may make an order requiring the owner to execute such work as may be necessary to obviate the danger. So yeah, in other words, we're serving an intimation notice on the owner. Often we'll give them a time period, say 28 days, to put something right. And if the owner doesn't cooperate, then we can follow that up by obtaining a magistrate's court order. And if they still won't do the work, well, the local authority can carry out the work and charge the cost of that work to the owner, as long as it's a reasonable cost. The advantage of that is that it's a magistrate backing the decision to carry out remedial work, so there's less chance of the local authority being challenged about the notice being appropriate. But the big problem, as all of you building control people probably realise, is speed, isn't it? Once the local authority is aware there's a potential risk, then they take on a liability if somebody suffers an injury while waiting for remedial work to take place. In other words, the wrong action was taken. You should have taken more emergency action, and now somebody's injured. So these are used sparingly. If something's dangerous, it's potentially imminently dangerous. So in the vast majority of cases, far better to use a Section 78 notice, because this isn't an exact science. Nobody can predict for sure what's going to happen with that dangerous building. So if in any doubt, there you go, Section 78, if it appears to a local authority that the building, et cetera, is in such a state to be used or is used to carry such loads as to be dangerous, and immediate action should be taken. They may take such steps as may be necessary for that purpose. So that's our emergency powers. Important to act immediately using these. Don't dither, because otherwise it will be challenged. If you wait 4 days before issuing one of these, then the owner, when he's sent his bill for the work you've carried out, he's going to say, well, it couldn't have been that urgent. You didn't serve it till the Friday, and you inspected on the Monday, and he'd have a case, wouldn't he? So straight on it with these. Yes, of course, we have the power to charge on reasonable costs incurred if we do carry out the work in default, and often we do, because usually owners aren't set up to jump on these dangerous structures swiftly, and so we've got emergency works contractors who will come out anytime, night and day, and get it sorted. There are rights of appeal, so we could be challenged by as to whether we took the appropriate action, particularly when we're sending the bill for payment. And it could be said that you should have used Section 77 powers. So highly important to collate evidence like photos and details. You'll be very glad that you did if there is an appeal. So before exercising our power under Section 77, we have a legal obligation, if it's reasonably practical to do so, to give notice of our intention to the owner. That doesn't mean if it's the middle of the night, we have to track down the owner. We can serve notice retrospectively, but we must make an effort to let the owner know what we're doing if we can. If we can't, it doesn't slow us up, we still do it, but we must take a reasonable effort to find out who the owner is and at least give them a phone call and say, look, this has to be done. This is what we're doing. By the way, you are liable for the cost of the work. Always tell them that as well, even though it's bad news. They need to know. A few other bits of legislation that I'm going to really whip through because I'm seeing time is eating away. I've practiced this twice and it wasn't as slow as this. Section 79, if a building is ruinous or dilapidated, then the council can take action under that to have it put right. Also can be used for requiring removal of rubbish or other material. The Highways Authority have got Section 165, which is about unfenced or inadequately fenced sources of danger. So they can take action under that legislation. And 167, if it's a retaining wall more than 1.35 metres high, close to a street, then they can take action under that. I've never heard of Highways Authority taking action under those sections. They usually rely on us to sort the mess out, I think, which is far more convenient for them. And fair enough, we're not going to argue it. We're just going to jump on it and deal with it. A few other important considerations to have in mind when undertaking work on dangerous structures. There they are. Let's go through them. Limitations on remedial work. Only the minimum amount of work is required to achieve the aim of protecting the public. So that's key. We must adopt the most cost-effective solution to meet the appropriate timescales, which is usually urgent. And that, as we know, is usually prevent access, drop to stabilise, or demolish. Building debris, the owner owns his rubble. When you've knocked his wall down, you can't necessarily take that away unless it's causing a hazard or it contains hazardous material. So it's for him to decide if he wants you to do that, in which case he'll have to pay for that. And if he wants, we can store the material for him somewhere if they're in the way. Either they can store them on site if there's room, but if not, we can store them, but then he's going to get billed for the storage costs if he's really that precious about his rubble. And let's face it, second-hand bricks, about £2 each these days, so it might be worth being precious about your rubble. Listed buildings, if it is a listed building or subject to a preservation order, or is in a conservation area, then there is legislation in the Planning Act, the Listed Buildings and Conservation Areas Act, in fact, so that a local authority can compulsorily purchase a building in need of repair. But in practice, of course, it's too urgent and we get called to take action under the Building Act because there's a risk to public safety. That said, we should work with the conservation officer at the council so we can be as sensitive as possible whilst safety takes precedent. We don't want to damage architecturally important features unnecessarily, and we want to protect any material that might be useful for restoration. So always have that in mind and try and work with people within the timescales available. Record keeping, it's so important. I've said it time and time again. Get your photos, get your evidence down, show how you've risk assessed and why you've taken action you've taken. And then that's a refresher for you. And it's also for your manager when they've got to deal with the angry owner who thinks you've been unreasonable or who puts in a legal challenge or an appeal. Follow-up action. This is an important one people forget. Just because you've taken the danger away doesn't mean you can walk away. You put a hoarding up, that's taken away the immediate danger. But if there's still a dangerous building beyond it, we have to worry, unfortunately, about the person who might be trespassing in there or going in there when they shouldn't be. So I would suggest that you should always consider Section 77 non-emergency action to make the structure completely safe, and then it can be for a magistrate to decide if that's correct and issue an order to make it safe, and then the cording can come down and everybody's happy. Common call for, I'm sorry, I'm running a bit out of time, Rachel. You're going to be showing me a watch in a minute, but I'll quickly whiz through this. A common call out for surveyors are unstable freestanding walls. So worth just a couple of slides to cover this in more detail. These are the aspects to consider when you're assessing them. Obvious movement or rocking. So is the wall live? Surface crumbling, condition of the mortar pointing. Is it lime mortar? Is it cement mortar? Cracking. How big are those cracks? Where are those cracks? What do they indicate is happening to the wall? The effect of trees, whether that's the physical effect of a tree bulging against a wall, or is it the root action on the wall? Verticality of the wall, of course. Where is it in terms of lean? Is it out of balance? I won't take time to talk about the middle third rule because it would take too long, and lots of people don't understand that, and feel free to contact me if you want to have a jaw about it. Surcharge load, is there a surcharge load on one side, or an excavation that the wall wasn't designed to accommodate? Think of the height to thickness ratio of the wall. Was it badly built in the first place? Is it too thin for its height? Many walls are. There's a lot out there that were never really fit for purpose. Think of the security of the cappings and copings. Think of what frost and water damage has done. Maybe it's silt if it's next to a road. Think of impact damage. Think of traffic damage, and that might be vibration damage that's happened and is ongoing. And think of damage from climbing plants. Often it's a wall they've stripped the ivy off, and that was all that was holding it up, and then it becomes dangerous because the ivy is growing into the joints. Here we go. This is wobbly wall syndrome. What do we mean by a live wall? Well, that's what we mean by a live wall. We were called upon to deal with that one. It was next to a path that was regularly used by school children. In fact, that afternoon there was going to be a few dozen school children go through there. So we jumped on it and got that to the ground and methodically took that down in a safe way. And he was wearing a hat when it happened, I assure you, because he told me so. It does make you wonder how many tragedies are prevented by building control teams around the country acting swiftly to make safe, dangerous walls like this, doesn't it? We see the headlines when it happens, but we don't know how many are prevented. This one wasn't prevented. It wasn't dealt with in time and resulted in a fatality. Not in Hertfordshire, but too much surcharge. It wasn't designed to take, and it collapsed, and someone got caught underneath it. An awful circumstance. Nearly there now. Yeah, if you want some extra bedtime reading, and I'm sure the majority of you do, there's a couple of quite old guidance documents there. BRE Good Building Guide 13, and RICS produced one on dangerous structures guidance. But it's not something you can learn from a book, really, is it? And as most of you know, involved in it, the best way is to deal with them, go out with experienced people, and build up your knowledge. But yeah, not to panic, and to deal with them methodically and think of the guidance that's been in the preceding slides. And finally, to conclude, I've got a short video. Some of you might have seen it, but it's what you might call a self-rectifying dangerous structure. So sometimes, yes, you can remove a chimney breast without supporting the stack. We talked about bomb-proof flattened bricks, didn't we, earlier? Well, yeah, sometimes you do that, and that'll stay there for years. But it's not a gamble I'd recommend. So let's have a look what happens here. That one looks a bit dangerous, doesn't it? Yeah, and it's still dangerous. Yeah, still dangerous. Go and get the tools.
Go watch the tools, Henry.
That's it. Go and watch the tools. Still dangerous. Still dangerous. Oh. There you go. Sorted. So that's going to save some paperwork, isn't it? But it's a striking video to conclude, and I'm sure those of you who haven't seen that one before has found that enjoyable. Rachel, I'm slightly over. I'll take a big slap on the wrist and shut up now.
That's okay. That's great. We have got a few questions coming in. Do you want to do the questions from the Q&A first, Trevor?
Yeah, sure.
Shall I read them out?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, if people can hang on a bit, that's great. Stay as long as you like. We'll go through the questions. If you've signed up for an hour and you're ready to go, then no hard feelings. We'll see you next time. But anyway,
yeah, everyone that's attended today will get a certificate to their registered email address, and I'll be sending a post-event email round with the recording as well. So on to the questions. Is the BCA required to be a structural engineer when it comes to structural damage, or would they request one to make an assessment of the damage?
It depends on the nature of the incident, and sometimes you do need a structural engineer to run a few numbers and give an opinion. I think an experienced building control surveyor, we know how buildings go together. We know how about load paths and structural frames. In the majority of cases, we have the knowledge to make the decisions. But there are cases when you need an engineer, and then we don't bluff it. We don't pretend to be one. We would source one, but we would take whatever steps are necessary immediately, because you can't just magic one out of thin air. So yeah, it's a good question. But yeah, sometimes you need one, but often you don't.
I'll deal with the local one at the end. Paul Reynolds, do you have access to props, cherry pickers, fencing?
Yes. We're set up with contractors who keep a little bit in stock, and they themselves are set up with hire places that can top them up if necessary. Yes, it can be difficult if it's in the middle of the night, I'm sure, and you suddenly need a lot of gear, but yeah, I know we've made what provision we can in that respect.
Do you know what was the cause of the explosion to the hot water cylinder? It says when these installations are protected by expansion vessels and pressure relief valves.
There wasn't much left of it to deduce that. I suspect I can only say that the safety valves weren't functioning properly or hadn't been put in place. So you had temperature pressure relief valves that should have prevented that from happening. Should have switched the thing off and blown the pressure through the safety valve. I don't know if Rich Murrow's in the audience and can give us knows and he's come on chat, but he's probably far too busy to be here. But he dealt with it, and no, all we know is, yeah, the valves failed. Otherwise, it wouldn't have blown up.
Okay, so next one. Trevor, who is legally responsible for effective measures to exclude, for example, looters or children playing or exploring, or to contain, for example, blowing hazardous dust or leaking liquids?
We are, yeah. These are all hazards. As I said, just because somebody might be a ne'er-do-well getting into climbing over a hoarding, if we've dealt with the dangerous structure, the dangerous building by hoarding it off, and then we walk away, and a month later nobody's done anything about it, and there's children getting in and looting or just larking about because it's an adventure playground, and they get hurt. I think we'd take some responsibility that we didn't take 77 action to absolutely wrap it up. Yeah, we do. Unfortunately, we owe due responsibility to even to people who shouldn't be there and have got in.
Another one. How many contractors do we have on standby?
How many do we have? I used to organise that in my previous role with the company. I think we've got at least 2 contractors. But we may have more now. I know that somebody was looking into taking on additional, but we've got 2, and they're the cavalry. When in the middle of the night, you're standing there and praying, and when they roll up, you breathe a sigh of relief.
Oh, I think I've just a message. I think we've got 3 contractors on the go at the moment.
Oh, thank you. There you go.
Up to information.
Not easy to get.
Secret sauce. Yeah.
Not many contractors who want to be involved, who've got the experience and the insurance and want to stay sober 24/7.
Another quick one. Should a BCO expected to be pushing down walls?
No. Well, no. I mean, look, Can we talk off the record? We can't talk off the record. You shouldn't be pushing down walls, because walls can spring back on you. Even if you push on the side that's leaning away from you, walls can spring back and do funny things. So you shouldn't. No, it's not for you to do that, is the official answer. And I'm not going to budge from that.
I'm just scrolling through the chat now. I've had lots of comments. Do you issue a written notice ever under Section 78?
You always issue a written notice under Section 78, even if it's retrospective. You always serve the notice, yes, and that would be done by the local authority.
And someone says, who do you call at 3 a.m. in the morning, apart from Ghostbusters? Who do you call?
I'll just go back on that last one. Obviously, you only issue 78 if it's valid, and if you're taking 78 action. Otherwise, you wouldn't. But so long as that's clear. So, who do you call Ghostbusters at 3 a.m. in the morning? Who do you call? You call your local authority emergency number, which is a 24/7 number, and they call our happy surveyor who's deep asleep, dreaming about something wonderful, and they get out to the incident within 2 hours if it's a valid dangerous structure call out. So go to your local authority depending on where the incident is, and they'll all have a emergency number.
Okay, just a local question. Do we have the latest on the sinkhole in Panshanger? I certainly haven't.
As I say, I'm out of touch, so I'm not necessarily knowing about every incident that's killed. So Panshanger is prone to them because of the chalk geology there. In fact, the foundations that are built there all have to be specially designed to accommodate the risk. So there are a lot of reinforced concrete foundation extensions going up in Panshanger. No, any colleagues out there who've been involved in that, who are watching, who can put that in the chat, let us know and let me know. Yeah, keep me up to speed, and I don't look like an idiot in front of a 200-person audience. Yeah,
that's great. We've got a couple more in the Q&A. Is there a specific time frame for the building control surveyor to get to the dangerous structure? And how does the on-call process work? Say, for example, the person on call doesn't answer the call.
Well,
do we have backup?
Any system can fail, and I can't hand on heart say that it's never happened that the surveyors the phone's died from the battery or is not getting a signal. But by and large, the system is that the surveyor is listening out. He's on call. He knows he's on call, and his phone is available and working. So he gets the call, and he knows the targets are 2 hours out of hours, and by and large, he makes those targets. So the system works pretty well in my experience. And back before HBC was formed, it was a bit hit and miss in some parts of the county. There's no doubt about it. In fact, there was virtually no service in some part of the county, certainly not out of hours. So it's good that it is.
Great. Somebody says, sorry if I missed it, but what happens if the building, if the BO cannot pay for repairs under a Section 78? Building control, maybe BCO, building control officer. What happens if the BCO
building owner cannot pay for the repairs under a Section 78? Well, he's legally liable for the debt. So what happens to anybody who can't pay a debt? That it would be taken from them somehow, wouldn't it? I don't know. That would be left to the council finance team to follow up. You can't. It wouldn't get written off just because they couldn't afford it. They'd have to sell the building, wouldn't they, and then pay for it through the proceeds of that, I guess. But it's we usually, when we've dealt with it, we would hand it over to the council team to collect the costs. And of course, usually if anybody's insured, then these incidents are often covered under their household insurance or their building's insurance.
How does dangerous building legislation overlap with other legislation? i.e. European protected species or other environmental regs, I'm assuming the urgent and dangerous work trumps everything else, but then Section 77 action would need to comply with other legislation too.
Yeah, well, yeah, we can't be too gung-ho, can we? Because you do get a situation. I mean, I can remember a situation where a dangerous wall had to be taken down very carefully because it was full of grass snakes and newts, and they had, was it newts or great crested newts? They were actually hibernating in the wall, and they found dozens of them. And this specialist team came out to bring them out as it was being taken down. So it can work, and if we're made aware that there's an issue, I'm sure without compromising on the safety of the people doing the work and the safety of people around the building, we would have it in mind. But of course, these things happen sometimes very suddenly, and we might not be aware. So we will take the steps we feel necessary, and sometimes, newts may be harmed in this process.
I'll try and do two questions in one. Does the local authority have a statutory duty to provide a 24-hour dangerous structure response? And are there certain sites like MOD, nuclear chemical works, that LAs don't deal with for dangerous structures?
Yeah, there are structures we wouldn't deal with. I don't think the people who've got nuclear facilities would go up there if there was an issue. They would have there'll be government organisations who would jump on those. Also, things like roads and bridges on motorways and things like that, they're dealt with by the county. They've got the engineers' experience. So when a Arctic hits a motorway bridge, luckily we don't get called out for that, and we'd be out of our depth if we did. So there are some we don't. What was the rest of that question?
Does the local authority have a statutory duty to provide
That's a good one, isn't it?
24-hour dangerous structure response?
I've always thought they did, but I think really it would be tested in a court if somebody was injured because as a result of a local authority not being on hand to protect residents with a service like that, then there could be a liability. But I think you need a lawyer for that one. I've only ever worked for local authorities who have provided the service. So, but I know there were a few that didn't. And I always thought they were winging a prayer and they could get caught out. So in 2016, they should have breathed a sigh of relief that he got covered. So you need a lawyer for that one, I'm afraid, or I need to get my head in the books.
We've got a couple of people say, do you get payment for being on standby? I assume you're being paid to be on call.
This is a technical seminar. It's filthy lucre has got nothing to do with it. No, I'm sure every surveyor gets out of bed at 3:30 in the morning to go out in a howling storm. Does it for the love of the job? No, that's not true. Yes, they get paid for being on standby, and they also get something for their time on site, and rightly so. There's a huge responsibility. It should be recompensed. They're giving up their time to do it, and giving up their night down the pub when they're on call if they like a drop of the amber nectar.
I've got someone questioning the so in the middle of the night, we think the question should have been, who does the surveyor call to say he's going in case he's not out in 30 minutes?
Yeah, well, I think it's still live. It doesn't often happen because it's usually there's somebody else there who the surveyor going can say, look, I'm going in, I'll be out in half an hour or whatever. Usually, it might be the fire brigade or the police or the building owner. But if there's not, then there is a facility where we can call the fire brigade switchboard. They obviously have a 24/7 switchboard going, and we can log our presence with them and say, we are going into the building, please can you raise an alarm if I'm not out within an hour. And then obviously they've got to make sure they call that switchboard back. So we have facilities in place for our surveyors to use to safeguard them if they go into the building in the middle of the night and there's nobody else there. I can't remember it ever being used because, as I say, usually there's somebody else who will be able to raise the alarm.
Great. I think that brings us to a close.
Good. Well, sorry, apologies I ran over. I don't know how many people dropped out, but hopefully there's a...
That's great. Now we've had 245 on the call, so it's been a great session, Trevor. As I said before, certificates will be sent out to you with the email address that you registered with. Also, I'll send an email out with a link to the video. And that's all. Do make sure you subscribe via our website to our communications, or follow us on social media where we advertise our forthcoming CPD events. Okay.
Love to see you all. Come again
Thank
soon.
you.
See you then.
Bye.
Cheers now.